Okay, hello students. Hello students, once again you're welcome to Wisdom University, and today we are still on this course, Network Session Management, and we're looking at chapter 8 and part 1. The first part, chapter 8 is divided to 6 different slides, 6 different sections, and the first one is the introduction. The second one is the introduction to VLAN, that's virtual local area networks. The third one is introduction to switch configuration, and the fourth one is the spanning tree protocol, and the fifth one is the power over Ethernet, and the sixth one is troubleshooting the switch configure interface. So we're going to be looking at them one after the other. So without much ado, let's begin. Okay. Let's begin. Without much ado, let's begin. Okay, so we will be looking at first we'll be looking at the objectives. Okay, we'll be looking at the objective of this chapter. The first objective is to be able to identify and describe the 3 types of VLAN. Okay, after understanding the introduction, we should be able to understand and identify the 3 types of VLAN, and then we should also be able to discuss the 2 ways for establishing a VLAN membership. Remember, VLAN is virtual local area network, so we should be able to establish the way. We should be able to discuss the 2 ways of becoming a VLAN member, and then also understand how to use the command to configure the network switch, the command language to configure the network switch. You remember in chapter 7 we looked at how to use the command to configure the router. So in chapter 8 we're looking at how to use the command to configure the switch. And then in these objectives again, we'll also be able to explain the steps for configuring a static VLAN, the step-by-step procedure, the procedural method for configuring the VLAN. Also, we should be able to tell or give the purpose of the spanning tree protocol, the sole purpose of the spanning tree protocol, and they also discuss the purpose of the 5 spanning tree protocol states, okay, as it is applied correctly. And then we should also understand how to use the simple network management protocol tools for network management. So we should be able to know how to use the simple network management tools, okay, for managing networks. And then we should also be able to discuss the advantages of using the power over the internet. Okay, now let's take a look at this chapter, the first part. This part we'll be looking at what we call the chapter objectives. We'll be looking at objective of the entire chapter, okay, will be to examine the computer networking issues that arise when you configure a network switch. Okay, networking issue that has to do with switch. Where the main objective of this chapter 8, is to look at the main objective of computer networking with regards to the switch configuration. Remember in chapter 7 we talked about networking with regards to router configuration. So this chapter is holistically about how to solve all the issues, the problems that surrounds configuring a switch in a network. So again, another thing to note is that we're going to look at let's take our highlighter. Another thing for us to know is the VLAN, virtual local area network. Okay, the VLAN. Okay, the virtual local area network. And we're going to look at the VLAN in part 2 of this chapter. You know, like I said, the chapter will be divided into 6 parts, and part 2 will be looking at the VLAN. Part 1 is what we're looking at, the introduction, the objective of the entire chapter. That's what chapter 1, chapter 8, part 1 is all about. Now, then again, another thing we're looking at is the basis of configuring a Cisco switch. Okay, remember this course we are making reference to Cisco switches and a Cisco router. Okay, you know we have Hawaii switch and so on and so forth, but we are using Cisco switch as our reference point. Okay, so we will also be looking at how to configure the Cisco switch, and we will look at it in part 3 of this section. Is that okay? And then this section will also learn or provide an introduction to the commands needed for configuring the VLAN, all the commands that are needed for configuring the virtual local area network. Okay, the wireless one, the wireless configuration. We look at all the commands that are necessary for configuring the virtual local area networks. I also demonstrate the steps on how to configure the static VLAN. The steps are all the procedure that is required for configuring the static VLAN. Is that okay? So these are the things we're going to look at, or that we'll be looking at in this chapter, in this section. Then the part 4, the chapter 8, part 4, we'll be looking at the spanning tree protocol, the STP, what we call the STP. STP, remember, as you know it, is a link management protocol that prevents looping, computer looping, that prevents the system from looping. And also, that's not the only thing it does. It also helps to control data flow over any possible redundant data path. So if there's any redundant data path, it will prevent the data from flowing into such a path. Okay, that's another thing in chapter 8.4. Then part 5 of this chapter provides an overview of power over the internet. Okay, we're looking at the PoE, and we're also looking at the benefits of implementing this technology in our network. Okay, then the part 6, remember, always we look at troubleshooting, how to resolve issues when it comes to network switch. Okay, so this is how this chapter is going to flow. This first part, the introductory part, just took a summary look at what we're going to be doing in the remaining parts of this chapter. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.